Among those, primary education in India, its future, education in modern India, a brief review, university education in India, past and present, Indian education in parliamentary papers, multi-purpose schools are worth mentioning for their lucidity and clear-eyed analysis. His monumental work on education and his scholarly inputs to the Secondary Education Commission, of which he was the member secretary, stand out as significant landmarks in the evolution of Indian education. We can never forget that CIE blossomed into an internationally reputed institution under his care and leadership. He was the principal of CIE from 1948 to 1957. It was because of his foresight, scholarly approach and administrative acumen that this institution has developed as a great center of research, extension and training. Professor Basu has left behind a legacy that is self-generating and self-sustaining. The ravages of time cannot slow down the process of institutional development that was set in motion by this great man. His memorable contribution to the cause of education will always be a beacon light guiding generations of academics and scholars. So, proceeding towards the program, it brings me immense pleasure to welcome and invite the speaker of the day, Professor Mary E. John, on the dais. We are grateful to have Professor Namita Ranganathan with us today to chair the speaker. I would like to welcome and invite Professor Ranganathan on the dais. Today, we also have Dr. Anupam Pachauri, President of CI Alumni Association. It's an honor to have you here, ma'am. I would like to welcome and invite you on the dais. So, introducing Dr. Anupam Pachauri. Dr. Anupam Pachauri earned her PhD award in International Education and Development from the University of Sussex, UK, and has been a Commonwealth Scholarship awardee. She has a wide range of professional experience of around 22 years, working in range of professional experience of around 22 years, working in the reputed government and non-government institutions in India in the field of teacher education and educational research. She's a faculty.
It's not about us, it's about Professor Basu and about the speaker, that's all.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Anupam Pachauri to share the annual report of the Department of Education CIE Alumni Association.
That I am an alumna of CIE, okay? So that's how I am here with you, and that's why I am here to present the report of the Alumni Association. Friends, we plan to organize many events, but there is positive time and so many other things in which our students and alumni are engaged and in their professional pursuits as well. But we have done some commendable events in the year 22-23. The first and foremost is bringing together various alumni for social events, which includes going to various dramatics events happening in the city and bringing the report back to the Alumni Association for sharing. An important event that we held this year in 2023 is to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Unni Krishnan judgment on which brought or highlighted the right to education. So the event was held on the 11th of February 2023, and we had a very commendable panel of lawyers, academics, researchers, civil society representatives who have worked on the right to education. This is the second event of this year, 2023, the Basu Memorial Lecture, which will be delivered by Professor Mary John, and we are very happy that ma'am very graciously accepted our request. 8th of March is also the Women's Day, and we wanted to bring together, because that would be the Holy Week, so we wanted to bring together the two events in one talk, and therefore we thought of Professor Mary John. So thank you, ma'am, for this. We have been holding meetings of the executive of the Alumni Association, and I'm very thankful that many of the members of the executive are today with us, who have helped us organize the events. We want to take it to a larger scale, and now we are reconsidering if we should concentrate. I know that we are getting messages that many of the people have joined online for the live stream, thinking that they are not important to be here for the face-to-face event, but we want more and more people to join us for the face-to-face events. So we hope that in future, more of us can join together. We plan to start also a monthly poetry group in the memory of one of our teachers and alumni of CI, Professor Dr. Sushil Tyagi. So that will be announced soon, and we hope many of you can join. There is also a cultural group which is coming together. We started with the theme of work and workforce in education sector, and therefore I think that even today's lecture will focusing on gender education and development will bring together the thoughts that we have been reflecting on regarding the workforce and situation, the precarity of workforce as well in today's times. Thank you very much. I won't take much of your time. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I would now like to invite Manmeet to introduce our speaker of the day and the chair.
Good morning to everyone present on this auspicious occasion of Basu Memorial Lecture. It's our immense pleasure to welcome Professor Mary John to the Department of Education as an eminent speaker of the day. I am profoundly delighted in taking this opportunity to introduce Professor Mary John, a distinguished personality who has remarkably contributed to the field of women's studies and feminist politics. She has served as a director of the Center for Women's Development and Women's Development Studies during the years of 2006 to 2012. And prior to that, she was an associate professor and deputy director of the Women's Studies program at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, during the years of 2001 to 2006. She has authored and edited numerous books, scholarly articles, international reports, and journals for many years. Few of her publications include Discrepant Dislocation, Feminism, Theory, and Postcolonial History, published in the year 1996. Contested Transformations, Changing Economies, Identities in Contemporary India, published in the year 2006. Women's Studies in India, a reader published in the year 2008. And Women in the World of Labor, Interdisciplinary and Intersectional Perspectives, recently published in the year 2021. Her profound writings have significantly dealt with the issues of gender in the context of development, modernity, intersectionality, labor, and feminist politics. Some of her essays critically analyze the framework of gender and development within the contextual realities of India. She advocates Indian feminism to engage with the structures of oppression and marginality. Moreover, the issues of disability, caste, minority status needs to be mainstreamed by establishing a critical dialogue across the global feminist discourse. suggests, and I quote, respect the notion of gender from its ritualistic connotation and making it really work for a more emancipatory and inclusive social order is one of the ways open to us and one we have every reason to take. Her crucial engagements across the widespread consequences of modern and postmodern era inspires us to critically appraise the new emerging social relations and their multidimensionality while embracing the idea of inclusion and social justice in the field of education. I would now request Professor Namita Ranganathan to felicitate Professor Mary E. John. Thank you, Professor Namita Ranganathan. Being a student of Professor Ranganathan, it brings me immense pleasure to have you with us on this occasion as well. Introduction to Professor Ranganathan, if you allow me. Okay, I understand.
Teacher and CA, that's
So, but only I would like to add that it's exceptionally heartening and stimulating for all of us, especially for students, to have you with us for this occasion. But I would request Dr. Anupam Pachori to facilitate Professor Namita Ranganathan. Thank you, Dr. Anupam Pachori ma'am. Now we would begin with the session by requesting Professor Mary John to enlighten us with her much-awaited observation and insights on today's occasion and session titled Gender, Education and Empowerment.
just adjust.
Just adjust it a little so that it's okay.
ऐसे करना if you don't mind, I'll sit down and use your slides and then I'll come up again.
So first I should thank the Alumni Association of the Department of Education. Can you hear me? Yeah. Am I clear? Yes. So many thanks for this great honor. I don't know if now what I have to say will be a kind of anticlimax after all these wonderful things that have been said. So many congratulations to this very active alumni association that is engaged in so many activities. What I would like to present here is actually a more general talk to open up questions of empowerment which otherwise have a rather vague or loose kind of set of meanings when it comes to women and gender relations more generally. And my hope very much is to stimulate discussion. So I'm not going to take too long, I hope. We're running a little behind, but and I will use a PPT because I'm going to be using data to some extent, numbers, which are not meant to be like final facts, but meant to be clues to help us think and give us a suggestion about issues. Can I have the next slide? Yeah. So, as I said, notions of empowerment are rather loose and vague when it comes to gender relations.
They're linked to equality, they're linked to life chances, they're linked to choices. What I'm going to do here is to open this up in relation to three areas. One is higher education, which is the area that you're all currently involved in. The next is violence, which is often equated with the disempowerment of women, is connected directly to violence. And the third, which I feel does not get enough attention, is work and employment. So in each of these, I will be trying to open up questions which don't seem to somewhere are not getting, I feel, the attention they deserve, whether for better or worse. Let me move, okay, yes. Perfect. The first is this very remarkable, positive development in higher education when it comes to the presence of women. I'm using gender here sometimes in a very simple mode, and you must interrogate me on that. The primary binary mode in which we are all assigned female or male gender. When we think of women in higher education, to me one of the most remarkable developments has not really been acknowledged. So we often talk about the bad issues, but when there is something positive, we also somehow seem to miss out on that. So at the time of independence, we had about 1 lakh students in our various universities and colleges, and of those 10% were women. So barely 10,000, right? By 2000, this number has already jumped to 40%. And if we look at the most recent data, and my source of data, I should always tell you what your source of data is the All India Survey of Higher Education, which is in the Ministry of Education. They collect based on reported data every year, and this is the source of information. I'm sure many of you already look at it and will be quite familiar with it. Annually, they collect data across all the UGC recognized institutions, individual institutions of national importance, colleges, etc. So in this large number, in this huge number of now that we have of universities, colleges, and other individual institutions, as of 2020, a very remarkable thing has happened, which is that women, in average, I'm talking in average figure, we'll go into the little more detail soon, are 49.6% of the enrolled student body. Now, because we have an adverse sex ratio, you know this, right? We all have an adverse sex. In India, we have an adverse sex ratio. We have less women than men in total population. Because of this adverse sex ratio, actually 49.6 crosses parity. It means that there are more, in terms of enrollments, there are more women enrolled for women of the 18 to 23 age group than there are men. Now, why is this not something that we think about or know or consider important, right? So I have sometimes wondered, how should we first of all understand it? Why is this not considered significant? Is it a silent revolution that has been going on with, women entering higher education in such large numbers, but somehow it's not of significance compared to, we've had debates about whether there should be more women in political life. I will be talking shortly about the situation in employment. When we think of any other public spaces, there is nothing like this. And visually and anecdotally, I think all of you will agree that it is when we come to spaces like colleges and universities that the sheer presence of women in our midst becomes very, very obvious in ways that are not obvious. And I don't know how many of you use the metro, but when I go to the Vishwavidhalaya metro, anytime after 1 o'clock, I don't know whether any other metro has this characteristic, but the women's line is very much longer than the men's line. And we usually think of a women's queue Okay, so those of us in the women's line have to take more time. I'm joking here, but it's an indication of some sort that what do we understand by this sheer presence of women students in our midst, and what should be, how much weight, how much significance should we give this? So obviously we have to look at this in a more disaggregated way, and I say women as a category. This is obviously a very heterogeneous category. Next slide. So if we take further, look at the data a little more closely. This is the 2020 year. First of all, the GER, that is the gross enrollment ratios. I don't have to spell this out for this kind of audience. It has jumped to 28.8%, which is a doubling, by the way, over the last 20 years. Enrollments have doubled. Again, an enormous increase that we can't quite fully understand, but it's been happening. If we look at a breakup across 100, if we have 100 students, then the breakups by caste are 13.2 SC, 4.5 ST, and OBC is 30.1. Muslims are 3.9%, others 1.9%. Upper castes are therefore 46.4%, which still means they're overrepresented. If we think of upper castes as about 15, we don't know exactly, but about 15 to 20% of the entire population. But the remarkable thing is that across these groups, whether well represented or not, okay, so OBC are relatively well represented, Muslims are underrepresented. Across all these groups, half, are women. So even amongst underrepresented, even amongst Muslim students who are in our higher educational spaces, half of them are women. So this is so intersectionally also then, women are staking a claim to higher education as never before, and this is something we need to take note of. It's happening, again, I don't have a full understanding of this. It's happening at a time when we have been worrying over increasing privatization. The reasons we worry about private, even aided or unaided institutions are now the majority of our higher education institutions. Our worry is that this means that the cost of education goes up. And we know how public institutions have been so well subsidized by the state at the national or state levels. In spite of that, in spite of the increasing cost of education, this incredible expansion has been happening. And in my view, I would say that today higher education institutions are more heterogeneous across a range of factors than ever before. I don't know that there is any other institution that has this degree of heterogeneity. And as someone who used to teach till recently, we were part of a program with the Ambedkar University, Delhi, where we had an MPhil PhD in Women and Gender Studies. I know that in the last so many years, there's been a veritable transformation in the composition of our student body, a genuinely heterogeneous one. I think the only ones who probably aren't entering, including rural, including first-generation learners, and I'm sure this is something you're grappling with on a daily basis in your discussions on education today. So in this heterogeneity, there is a genuine presence of the female gender in a way that we don't see anywhere else. Next, please. So here, I don't know, this is a little small. I don't know if can you see this? Is it visible to you? Or is it a little too small? Basically, using again the same ISHE data, this gives you breakups, because as I said, this 49.6 and so on is an average, right? And an average can hide a lot of variation, right? You can have lows and highs. Educational B.Ed institutions are amongst the very high proportion of women in B.Ed institutions. Relatively low in law or in engineering, highly technological. But what I want you to see here, and I'll just walk across. Briefly, this is telling you that in the last 5 years, it's giving you last 5 years of statistics across the range of undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. And you see the increases in the last 5 Can you hear me? So in many of them, it's over half bachelor degrees. Please note, it's 118 per 100 if you note many of these. Some are very obviously very female dominated. Look at nursing, for instance, which is very, very female dominated, but becoming less so over time. But otherwise, please see how much even under law, under technology, please see the increases. So I just wanted you to have a sense here of the extent to which, even in very male-dominated spheres of education, even in very male-dominated spheres of education, women are sticking a claim. Okay, so and this was not true when I was a student 30, 40 years ago. This was not the case. IITs had maybe 5% women in them. Today they have 30%. Okay, so that is what I wanted to. So this is not a story. This is a set of clues for us to think further about the sheer presence of women in higher education institutions. So what should we make of this is what I will ask you when we have a discussion moment. What do you think this means? Right? What significance should be attached to it? Why have we not researched this more carefully? Is a question I have for us in gender studies as much as for people in the sphere of education. Why is this high presence of women not something we are interested in? My next slide. Okay, I'm now jumping for that, because of time. I'm jumping to the moment of 2012, December. All of us may remember this horrible gang rape that took place in December here in Delhi, often either called Delhi gang rape, sometimes called Nirbhaya. We don't still use her name. I think sometimes I used to, but I think we better not use her name, give her anonymity. The interesting thing was that something about that gang rape energized everyone. We had protest marches, people in Raisina Hill, thousands of protesters, days on end, demanding justice. We had, and these were not confined to Delhi. They spread across other cities. It became, global news almost. And even more interestingly, various institutions in our country felt somehow accountable. We had laws, we had the revision of our laws. 2013 saw the Criminal Amendment Bill, we saw the Sexual Harassment in Workplace Act, and so on. But one of the institutions that I was particularly interested in was the ways in which the UGC, our UGC, which we often complain about, the UGC also felt a sense of accountability, set up a task force, and I was a member of that task force. We were asked to look into issues of safety and freedom of women and of students more generally on our campuses. We were given an open, carte blanche. We were actually invited to go about it as we saw fit. It was a very remarkable experience for us. We were able to hold open forums. In fact, we held an open forum in Delhi University in 2013, in which we asked administrators, faculty, students to share with us what were the issues that they felt were the most critical in terms of facing forms of harassment and what were the kind of safety measures available to them in these institutions. We also sent out questionnaires across the country. We visited Delhi, we visited Hyderabad, and we visited Kerala. I mean, there wasn't all that much that we could do, in the time available, but we had these open sessions with various students and others, and we got information via filled out questionnaires from different parts of the country. And based on that entire experience, was for us an eye-opener. By the way, if any of you are interested in what we did with that, we came out with a report called the Suction Report. And it's on the UGC website. I would really encourage you to take a look at it, because we tried to pull together our concerns and our recommendations. And again, I will say we were given complete freedom to put our ideas down, to suggest. What was a shock to us was that gender sense, and we had assumed, maybe, that issues of harassment and violence is not a new issue. It's not as though we discovered it with the Delhi gang rape, not at all. Women's organizations, institutions have been concerned about issues of harassment and violence from at least the 1970s and 80s. It's an old issue. Women's organizations and others on campuses like Delhi University have been agitating over it for a long time. You have a committee, a forum against sexual harassment, and you also have redressal mechanisms here in Delhi University. So it's not as though we were doing something out of the blue. But we discovered to our shock that in fact issues of gender sensitization were amongst the weakest of issues on our campuses. Weak in the sense of confused on the part of most people. What would it mean to be gender sensitive? Confusion, denial. Do we even need a women's college, for instance, who tell us, even in Delhi, or let me say Delhi was, because we assume again, maybe it's a capital, it's seen so much of activism, we assume things would be much better here. But women students had lots to tell us about the campus here, and its many, many aspects that they found were not safe. We were surprised when undergraduate students told us, including from very, very privileged colleges, which I shall not name, they told us that when they experience harassment, which they said is very common, they said it would be better not to talk about it. That if they did, they were fearful that the administration would report to the parents. This was for us very, very surprising. That the first move would be to inform parents, and young people were frightened that if this were to happen, they would be it would be a kind of victim blaming kind of experience, and that some of them, if they came from conventional families, for whom this was a very new move to be able to leave home and study here, that they may be asked to leave and go home. So then if that was the kind of reaction that they might receive, then some of them said better not to speak out at all, right? Better to endure it and live with it. So this kind of situation where it was a subject of indifference, vulnerability, which by the way is very much compounded if you're from there are students who are traveling by in rural parts of Delhi, for instance. Some of the colleges, students were describing to us how they come by tractor. They travel by tractor from their villages and to come to the college every morning, and there's no telling whether the tractor is going to actually do the job or not. Students with disability, we discovered, are particularly vulnerable. This was something I had not thought about, that if you are visually disabled, for instance, and that means you are dependent on another person that dependence is structural. In other words, that dependence doesn't come and go. That dependence is continuous. So many women with visual disabilities, which on the one hand we were very happy to see that disability has become an issue, that we see students with disability entering our higher education institutions. In my time, this was not at all happening. So this is happening. It's a big plus. But at the same time, their structural vulnerability was not somehow something we had thought about. That by virtue of their disability, they were so dependent on someone to help them that if anything were to take advantage, they would be in no position to handle that. So by class, by region, we discovered, for instance, that students from the Northeast were thought of as quote-unquote loose. They reported how if they stepped out for walks in the evening, people would think that they were available, that they could be propositioned even. This was very surprising. Students wearing the hijab also told us how they are taunted for wearing the hijab. So there are many aspects of this kind of harassment. Many aspects that we have to be careful, and students in colleges where where there's a lot of distance and there's no public transport. This was in Hyderabad. I don't know if you're familiar with Osman. I don't know if any of you know Osmania University. It's a very large campus, and the public transport is not very good. And the women's hostel is in a very corner of the campus. So if these women students wanted to be able to access anything, they would have to depend on others. And so very often they would depend on young men with their motorbikes. This is obviously something you can depend on. But then they felt that they were in a position of deep vulnerability, because there was this kind of feeling that, okay, I've helped you now, I've taken you from A to B, now you do something for me, right? So a lot of this, very subtle, very sometimes hard to pin down, many forms of vulnerability were things that we heard and were very surprised by. Next slide. So harassment is an issue. So the thing I want to say around this whole, even surprisingly to the extent to which I as an older person assumed, oh, these issues have been sorted. No, they have not been sorted. They are still very much with us. In the aftermath of the gang rape, issues of sexual harassment and sexual violence had become the issues for discussion. And so, as someone who had not been looking at issues around violence that much, it wasn't my subject of research, I found myself also then looking at data. And I tend to use data, as I said, as a clue to think with, to help us, in such a country that we are. And I was very surprised to discover, using now the National Crimes Records Bureau data that the Home Ministry collects every year from our police stations. It's another very important source of data on crimes in India. And there are different chapters, and one of the chapters is crimes against women. I would invite you to look at it. In the year 2013, I looked at the crimes data, and in my own mind, and since rape was thought of as the crime, and the Delhi gang rape gave us this image of stranger rape, what we would call stranger rape, as such a dangerous and horrific crime. So I wanted to see, okay, how do we place a crime like that in some kind of perspective? Can numbers help us? And I had an inkling, maybe a vague idea that, yes, the standard distinctions in cases of rape are known to the victim and unknown to the victim. Okay? This Delhi gang rape would be a clear case, an unambiguous, clear case of stranger unknown to the victim. And I assume that maybe there are more cases of people known to you, but I was shocked by this very first figure. This is 2013 to I think 2020 is maybe 95% or 96%. 98% of cases of rape lodged in our police stations are known to the victim. You see my point? Barely 2% are the cases like the stranger rape. And why do I emphasize this? I emphasize this because our understanding of violence is one where we assume that the most dangerous is outside, is the unknown. We tell our daughters or young people, we tell them, don't go out at night, don't talk to strangers. We think that that's the most unsafe thing you could possibly do. But the facts are not that. These numbers mean something. And by the way, these are numbers of FIRs. This is not, we don't actually know how many rapes there are. We don't have that kind of data to know actually how much there is in our country. So this is a smaller number than actual cases. These are the cases that make it to the police station, that are not rejected at the police station. And I would invite you to think with me, what are the likelihood, which are the kinds of cases that are more likely to go to the police than others? How easy is it to go to the police when a case of violence is somebody you know? Know means somebody you trust, somebody who has power over you, somebody who's part of your work in some way, whether in the home, whether in the workplace, whether in the educational institutions. So in my view, it would be much harder to go to the police when it's somebody you know. Whereas it's much easier to report somebody who's unknown to you. So we are looking at a very, very skewed situation situation where the Delhi gang rape, in a sense, was an exception. And we're not used to thinking of it as an exception. So it was very important, and I still think this is something very important for us to think about. Domestic violence continues to be the most highly reported form of violence, the hardest thing to report, and yet the most reported to our police. Many cases don't maybe even belong. I have put here the kidnapping and abduction. These are categories, by the way. I had to learn about these categories when I looked at the NCRB, the Crimes in India report. Kidnapping and abduction is a category under rape, and this is a category which I discovered and others also discovered is mostly one where parents of a girl are lodging a case of kidnapping and abduction against the boy when a couple elopes. So the question I would ask us here is this actually a rape case, or what do we call this? What are these kinds of cases that are being put there in the police? So we have to interrogate. In other words, what I'm saying is we think of violence, we recognize violence as a very significant part of our vulnerability, of the inequality and of our gender relations. That is very much there. But are we sufficiently well informed about what are the forms it takes and what are the issues around it that we need to understand better? Are there things that we're getting wrong perhaps in our thinking around violence? So that's the second area I want to open up for us today. Next. Okay. I'm coming to my final one and I won't take too long. So if violence is recognized but largely misunderstood, I think. My third is, and I think you can see quite clearly?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. These are work participation rates. You can see clearly urban, rural, male, female. And I've chosen the years. This is from the National Sample Survey Organization. No, National Sample Survey Organization, and I've chosen 1990s to 2000s because these are the years of the highest growth rates. I don't know if you recall the very high growth rates we had in the 90s and in the 2000s, after which the growth rates have a little bit dropped. By the way, the figures have become anything even worse after that. So, it's not that the situation has become much better now. But please look at this data. So here you have a comparative picture. You can see male rates, which are largely over the last 20-year period. They've largely remained the same. It's about half, 55% or so, which is about right. Half the working population is working. Others may be studying. Others may be out of jobs or retired and so on. So this is the male figure, and it's not very different in urban and rural. So it's more or less stable. Bear in mind though, of course, this includes so-called good jobs and terrible jobs. Highly exploitative, it's not as though men have a great time in the job market. It's not, permanent salary jobs that some of you have here. These are the most prized jobs and very few and far between. So this includes all kinds of work for which there is pay. Yeah. So in case of men, it's about standard. But if you please look at the female, first of all, notice the urban and rural difference. And this, I have to say, when I had first looked at this 20 or more years ago, I myself as a gender person was very much, had to revise my own common sense understanding. Our common sense understanding is that rural India has no prospects, that women will be much more dependent in rural India, that urban India is the place for job opportunities. Wouldn't that be our sense? Our sense would be, surely that's true. But it's not true when it comes to actually paid work. Rural India offers almost double the kinds of paid work. A lot of it not good, a lot of it is agricultural labor, paid agricultural work. Yes? But 32.8, the figure for rural India in 1993-94 compared to 15.5 for urban India. Next story, next part of the story, the shocking part of the, so it's low, it's lower in urban India than in rural India, and it gets worse over the years. It's declining. It declines in rural to 26.1, it declines in urban to 13.8. Cities like Delhi, it's below 10. South India, better, 20 or so, 20, 25. So this, to my mind, is a really, I say, when violence cases are given headlines, there's a horrible, case, it comes to the headlines, it's disturbing, for some reason you all want to know that there's this horrible case of violence. But this does not make headlines. And in my view, this is as much a source of dependency. Because this means that very few, including all of those who are claiming high, if I may go back, can I have the last slide? So even when, or precisely when, we are seeing enormous expansion in higher education, this is not translating into meaningful job opportunities. Okay? So here we have very peculiar, and this is why I want us to think about empowerment in a little, take this challenge and paradox and put it in front of us and think. On the one hand, we have enormous entry into higher education. On the other hand, we are seeing declines in job opportunities and very much concentrated in bad jobs. Rural India, agricultural labor. Urban India, number one, jobs for women in urban India are primary school education, something of course you all engage in. And the second is paid domestic work. This is number one and number two jobs in terms of proportions. The finance sector, the media, where we see women are visible in these sectors. These are very tiny sectors, very tiny. So they don't provide significant levels of employment. So huge expansion in education, declines in work. If I take an overall average, it becomes 15%. Of course, women are working very hard in their homes. Let's be very clear, I'm not trying to say that women are idle. Women are engaged in our country in enormous levels of what we call unpaid work. Unpaid work at home and outside. Beyond, even in farms, even in businesses, women are very much active. Women, you see a woman in a shop, for instance, but it's not hers, she's not getting any pay for that. So, enormous amounts of unpaid work, very small amounts of paid work. So, when we talk equality and empowerment, how do we bring these stories together? That is my question. How do we, certain things are visible to us, violence is visible, is recognized. So young people in our, when we spoke to them in the colleges and so on, they said, we want to become independent, they told us. We have left home, we become adults, we've come to college, we want to become independent. And so my heart breaks when I think, what after? Is it only these few years in the college that is in fact their little bit of independence where freedom from harassment is a goal that they would like to aspire for? Is that the most that we can offer them? What else should we be offering them? And I'll leave you with that question and we can have discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Mary John, for this very stimulating lecture and this great set of ideas for all of us to think about, because you've left us with a lot of reflection to engage in and a lot of, I think, interpersonal discussion to arrive at some answers to the questions that you have raised. I'm really grateful to you for three things. That you have not seen access to higher education and enrollment in isolation from women's participation in the workforce. You've looked at the whole journey and you've looked at the presence in higher education but the absence in the workforce. You've also been able to point out to us that rural India has better figures than urban India, and so you've shattered everybody's Bombay golden dream, and I think that's a very important learning for us. The other thing which is very important is, this sudden surge of doing qualitative research and this belief that in qualitative research you pick up a few case studies but you don't locate them in macro figures, and you brought macro figures from national bodies. So I think that's also very important, that when we take up qualitative research, we should also look at the macro picture, both the aggregated and the disaggregated, depending on what our research interest is, and then embark on doing meaningful case studies to substantiate and find answers to what we're actually trying to probe. So I think this is something which you helped us to debunk, because we tend to think that we don't need to look at databases. In fact, the NFHS data, the fifth cycle data is out district-wise, taluk-wise, etc. And it also says very, very interesting things about women's representation. So thank you for doing all of that. And then, I think equality, the role of the state, governance and social justice for women are all issues you flagged through the course of your lecture, and it is really remarkable. And I think each one of us understood it, we could relate with it, and we are left with all kinds of reflective issues in our minds. So we will now take up a discussion, and feel free to ask questions. And I just asked Anupam, and she said that we can have a discussion for 25 minutes or so. So this is an open forum to have a discussion. I just want you to be very brief. If you're making an observation, introduce yourself, be very brief, so that your observation can also contribute to the discussion. And if you have a question, certainly be very brief also, so that then we give more opportunity to the speaker to respond to us. Thank you. Yes, one important thing is कि आप हिंदी में भी अपने प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं, ठीक है? Let language not be a barrier. हिंदी में पूछिए, अंग्रेजी में पूछिए, इसमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Would like to sort of start, and does anybody have any question? Yeah, Ramurthy? Yes. I think he needs to get that mic. We do have a port.
Hello. Good morning, ma'am. I have one observation to make. Okay, sure. My name is Ram Murthy. I am teaching here in the CIE itself in the capacity of assistant professor. I have one observation to make and then two small questions. Observation is that the entire data you talked about the entry point, and probably it does not tell us about the completion of the education itself. And secondly, to me it appears quite distant from the reality of political economy, what we are doing, how entire political economy is being operated across the world, and in India, specifically after 1990 in general, and particularly from 2014 itself, is a disturbing for me, because the number I don't think speak everything in actual sense, while at I think micro level in particular. So when we take those numbers, if it really that it is speaking every truth which is being bear by the women even in context of their education, and to my mind probably we look at and we look at this entire set of data in the context of political economy where we are going, and especially the kind of perspective which is being promoted about gender, it is really very, very disturbing. And I felt really sad that probably you couldn't comment at all about that. This is my small observation. And my question is that when we are talking rural-urban data in particular, and it is shown that rural population is much more independent in economic terms, don't you think that we need to look at it in a proportionate sense in the proportional population of urban and rural area, and specifically kind of payment which has been made in that context, if we look at that in that context? Despite more engagement in terms of number, probably rural people are still quite at lower length in terms of economic earning itself. And lastly, my question is about that. Can you really can you look at gender and, I mean, men and women as a binary category without looking at the angle of caste in real sense of the term? Thank you.
Would you like to collect some more, respond on a one-on-one? But he's raised many questions, so maybe you should respond to them.
Can you hear me? Thank you for those observations and questions. They're absolutely on target. We must look at the political economy that is guiding the policies that are producing the results that I'm talking about. It would be interesting to think what is the political economy of the expansion in higher education. That is also seen entry from by class, by caste. You're absolutely right. We cannot simply rest with the binary. So in terms of education, we are seeing a heterogeneity in our higher educational bodies, thanks in part to a reservations policy that is now being implemented. But also I make a claim that rural entrants are coming for the first time, or first generation learners. So is there a political economy to the higher entry of women into education which is not translating into jobs? This would be a very interesting question to raise because they are entering, many of them are even participating perhaps in the coaching industries that are now part and parcel of the new, if you want to call it the political economy of higher education. I think these coaching industries, I'm told in many towns and cities, many students don't even attend classes any longer. They're registered because they need the degree, but hardly any classes are happening, and even the teachers are actually teaching in the coaching industry. So we have to get a good picture. What is the political economy of that kind of system that we are a part of today? What is the political economy at the level of workforce, at the level of development that is not creating the kinds of jobs it ought to? So one of the phrases we hear is jobless growth or job loss growth. So there is a contraction even. So what kind of political economy is it that can produce growth without jobs, or where more jobs are being lost than new jobs are being created? So I would very much say these are issues for further investigation, for further research. You're absolutely right that the binary is a very limiting. We have to start somewhere, so I've worked with the binary. But we have to complicate that binary across every axis, including, class, caste, community identity, sexuality, who identifies as male, who identifies as female. All of these have to complicate our story. I'm using the binary because that is our national data sets are limiting in that sense. Sometimes you can get where you get intersectional data, and you should look at that intersectional data. The NSSO, for instance, you could have done more with that. There are people who have done it. You can get information by religion, by caste, and so on from the 1994 or 95 round. The NSSO will let you, in fact, find out across community and caste. And here I can say that the biggest losers in this decline of work are rural women, SC, ST, Muslim in that order. So upper caste women in urban areas to some extent find little enclaves. They find little enclaves in the new sectors of media, in the new sectors of finance, and in our colleges and universities. So yes, very much we need to break that down further and get more of a picture. I hope I've responded to your question.
Yes, please.
थैंक यू मैम। मैं विजय कुमार हूँ और दिल्ली शिक्षा निदेशालय में पुस्तकालय अध्यक्ष के रूप में काम करता हूँ। मैं यहाँ पे भी 2 साल सेवा दिया था पैकेज में, SCI में। मुझे काफ़ी अच्छा लगा जो पिक्चर और जो मैक्रो डेटा आपने दिया है, लेकिन 75 साल हो गए, बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग फिगर है, लेकिन जिस पेस से ग्रोथ होना चाहिए, जिस पेस से जेंडर सेंसिटाइजेशन होना चाहिए, वो नहीं दिखता है। जब हम शासन की बात करते हैं तो उनकी शब्दावलियों को अगर हम हाल फिलहाल में देखें, जितने भी शासन में हैं, उन शब्दावलियों में आप पाएंगे कि कितना गिरावट आया है, और उसकी नकल करते हैं। अगर हम सोशियोलॉजी के पर्सपेक्टिव में देखें, सेंसिटाइजेशन प्रोसेस को देखें, तो हमारे वर्क प्लेस में वो काफ़ी कुछ रिफ्लेक्ट होता है और देखने को मिलता है। और साथ ही अगर हम इंडिविजुअल केसेस ऑफ वायलेंस को देखते हैं, वो तो दिखता ही है, उसमें जो फिगर है, नॉन फिगर और ये सारी चीज़ें। लेकिन अगर हम जेंडर पॉलिसी की बात करेंगे शासन की तरफ से और कई जगह की, तो उन्होंने उन शब्दावलियों को भी ले लिया है जिसमें बराबरी और वो सारी चीज़ें, उससे भी वो टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल करते हैं जेंडर पॉलिसिंग में और जेंडर वायलेंस में। कई तरह की चीज़ें हमें शासन की तरफ से भी देखने को मिलती है, समाज की तरफ से भी देखने को मिलती है। मेरा ऑब्जर्वेशन है। थैंक यू।
So if I've understood, you're talking about there are social aspects as well as aspects of the state policy and social processes, which we need to think about if we want to understand what is going on now. I think you're right. Did you mention Sanskritization as a process? Yes, this is M.N. Srinivasa's term, Sanskritization, by which he meant that so-called lower castes imitate or try to gain social mobility. Their patterns of social mobility is to imitate upper caste practices in such a way which are much more conventional and much more negative when it comes to women, because traditional upper caste practices are parda basically. In a Brahmin household in the past, a woman was not to be seen outside the home. And that was the mark of her status. Her status depended on that. And it was a mark of stigma for so-called lower castes to be working in public. Because that was a mark of stigma, that was a mark of vulnerability. That she was working outside and could be, therefore, in some way compromised, perhaps. So his understanding of Sanskritization was that people try to imitate. And there are very interesting accounts of this. In fact, I don't know if you are familiar with the autobiography of Devi Kamble.
I think some of them are.
You have
Some people have.
It's a very, very remarkable autobiography of a Mahar woman, a Dalit woman in Maharashtra, which actually describes. So this is the caste from which Ambedkar came, and Ambedkar revolutionized in his own way. But she's describing the 1930s and 40s, her own home, where she says her own mother did not wish to be stepped outside the home. Her status was not to have to do so. And she's very, very satirical and very, very, it's a very, very sort of, how should I say, black humor kind of description of the status of Mahar households and what they were imitating. So this kind of effort to be like upper caste, to be Brahmin-like, even though you're being treated as untouchables in the village, you're trying to imitate those kinds of things. So yes, there are processes of that. Would that explain, so the question I have then is, does that explain today's entry into higher education? That now it's a claim that is being broadly followed, that is to say, so-called lower castes are now sticking a claim to higher education. Would you say this is Sanskritization? How, I would say that's maybe not enough of a term. Let us think of better descriptions for, when someone like Ambedkar said educate, organize, and so on, I don't think he was thinking in terms of Sanskritization. He was thinking in terms of something more empowering than imitating Brahmins. So we need, in other words, what I'm saying is we don't have good descriptions, and you were mentioning quantitative and qualitative. These numbers are only clues, they are only a beginning. We actually do need much more qualitative accounts. We need better accounts of the claim to education that is driving families today, such that families are willing to even pay a lot for their daughter's education. What is that claim? And where does it go? The maid works in my home, her daughters are educated. But the question is, what next? And there is a tragedy. One of them has done a BSc in home science from Lady Irving, excellent degree. Now, where's the job? Where's the job? What is she doing? She's now working on some online, earning next to nothing, hoping something may come of it. So, a real claim, she's a domestic worker. Her fear was her daughters will follow her as domestic workers. No, that has not happened. They have gained entry to higher education. But what?
I think somewhere maybe he's also trying to lament that after 75 years of independence,
Yes.
the state has done very little for empowerment.
Yes, that's true.
Education, as you just raised, providing education is something, but what about empowerment?
Yes.
And at his workplace also he seems to see a lot of
At this junction.
inequality and a lot
No,
of
you're absolutely right.
misjudgment.
And if I may go beyond what I said today, I have, got on record, what is happening in Assam today, where anyone marrying below the age of 18, the families are being arrested, in the name of gender equality. And I have gone on record, if you want to read, you can read me, I've just written about it in the Indian Express. Please read what I have to say, because I think it's a very serious issue. And I have disagreed profoundly with the idea that we can do gender empowerment through criminalizing social issues of this nature. The idea that you turn people into that it's a criminal act, and that a law criminalizing anyone marrying below the age of 18 will solve the problems that we are talking about today. That if everybody married above 18, then automatically the education will come, the jobs will come, the health indicators will go up. It's simply not true. Unless the colleges are there, unless the meaningful opportunities are there, unless the health services are functioning, unless the nutritional levels get better, that's not going to get better simply by a policy that decides to criminalize. I'm willing to say this. Criminalization is not the way forward. So if that is a policy, then yes, we have to ask questions about the kinds of policies we are offering.
More questions? Yes.
मैम नमस्ते, मैं संजय। मैम मेरा प्रश्न है कि शिक्षा में महिलाओं का पिछले वर्ष 2 संस्थान, एक कर्नाटक और दूसरा ईरान में हिजाब को लेकर के प्रदर्शन हुए थे। इस पर आपका क्या ओपिनियन है मैम?
The hijab issue, yes. It's a complicated question. Let me say it's a genuinely complicated question. Insofar as, okay, let me put it in one way. In one way, it's not a complicated question at all. Why does it matter what you wear in order to access educational institutions? Why does it matter if, Sardars wear turbans? Right? Has anybody, in fact, sometimes I'm very surprised that sometimes Sardars are willing to endanger their lives on the roads not to wear a helmet because they wear a turban. And I think, is that really a wise decision? Does that mean that when you have an accident, nothing will happen to you? So certain kinds of markers are not a matter of debate, and certain others, a minority community like Muslims, have been made to feel that the wearing of the hijab is the single most important aspect of their identity. Okay, so that is a complicated question. How has that happened? What are the processes that have led to that? But to say in Karnataka, it started in Bangalore, in the coastal city of Bangalore, and then it spread. To say that you cannot enter our college, this is an undergrad, this is the 11 and 12 age group. In South India, the 11 and 12 is not in school, it's called pre-university. So it began in a so-called pre-university context, where they could say, the other thing they would say is that these are children. Because they are below the age of 18, they are children, so they have no choice, they have no decision in this matter. Okay? So on the one hand, I am saying it makes no sense to me. Here is a community that has been stigmatized, and this community wants to be part of our educational system, right? These young women are joining our co-educational secular institutions, and we are saying, no, you can't come. completely and totally straightforward. What is not so straightforward is the way the case is being fought. Because the way the case is being fought is to say that the hijab is essential aspect of identity. And I don't believe that is true. This is a matter of debate. It should be a matter of choice. I know there's a person here wearing a hijab. I would love to hear from you. It should be your choice. It should be something you wish to wear. If there's a growing tendency to identify in terms of religion, okay, say so. Yes, religion has become a major marker of identity today for whatever sets of reasons, right? For whatever sets of reasons, we are seeing people wearing all kinds of things. I will not go into the details. It should be a matter of choice. Do not turn it into an essential, as though a woman could not, and I would love to hear from you. I have many Muslim friends who are respectful Muslim, believe in Islam, but who do not wear a hijab. It should be equally possible to say I am a Muslim and not wear a hijab. So if you turn it into an essential aspect of your identity, you're turning those who don't wear a hijab into non-Muslims or into somehow less than Muslim, who are not subscribing to the right kind of Islamic religious identity. And this is the dangerous part of the story.
And actually, you know,
you must understand what I'm saying.
Hindu girls wear a black bindi, they call it a botu, in Karnataka.
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to leave their homes without that botu.
Yeah.
So that is also part of their,
yeah, so there's a very uneven visibility of markers. So if I was still an active Christian, I may have a cross. I have a cross, nobody's going to notice that cross. The botu has been, is for many Hindu girls is a standard thing they wear. They would probably feel naked if they didn't wear that and they left the home without it. Right? So those are not objects of scrutiny. Certain minority groups are being scrutinized now. That's one. That scrutiny does not work for me because all of us have a right to education, all of us have a right to entry. This is the best possible thing for us to be as heterogeneous as possible in our classrooms. So don't turn it, at the same time, don't turn it into an essential aspect of identity such that those who do not wear it are suddenly feeling that they are, failing in some ways the standard of what it means to be a Muslim or what it means to be. If I don't wear a cross, does that mean I fail as a Christian? If somebody doesn't, what are we doing when we are turning these into sort of markers, essential markers of identity? I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, you have, very well. So let's collect 2 or 3 more questions and then maybe you can respond to them collectively because that will save on time also. Yes, Ramesh. And I request all our audience asking questions to be very focused.
Yes, I'll try to be focused. My question is about the relation between job and education.
Yes.
Is there any direct link between job and education? Your data shows that although there has been substantial increase in availability of education and access to education, but access to job has been missing.
Yes.
So the argument which is given is that the education is not appropriate to creating the jobs, or the education needs to change substantially. Now, if we look at the kind of courses which we have in education and the jobs, my observation is that we have 2 kinds of educational or job-related things. One is the add-on course like BA, or say library science, or say computers, or so forth. So my observation is there is a lack of availability of add-on courses, or the add-on courses are very costly. Say for example, learning about computers, or learning about you are showing in the medical field. The add-on courses which ITIs are supposed to do, so the number of ITIs are less, so the add-on courses are less, and there is the thought of that the job will be created by education on the job site itself.
think we collect one or two more questions maybe and then get you to respond. Firoz?
I am Firoz, I am teaching in a primary school. So I have one specific question and two observations might also shape up as questions. My observation is even the comparatively low proportion of cases of sexual violence in public places are too many and maybe enough to determine the character and determine and characterize their role in the maintenance of access to public places and power. So those few cases are already too many.
Your voice was not.
Firoz, can you come again, please?
I am saying that the low proportion of cases of sexual violence in public places, which you referred to,
Yes.
are already too many, and they are enough to determine access of women to public places and power. So those low cases, yes, are too high already. And in the sense, what they imply, what they end up doing. And my two observations are, so maybe it will be very interesting to look at, if we are talking about higher education, not just the representation of women, which has come to parity in terms of students and scholars, but also women occupying roles of academic and administrative positions in higher education.
That's very important.
And my third observation is that when this parity has been achieved, to whatever extent it has been, so it will be interesting to look at how this parity has been achieved. On the one hand, maybe without much enabling support from the state, and on the other hand, while there is maybe rightly a demand for the state to have some legislative enactment for representation in assemblies and for accessing public spaces, enabling support for public spaces. So these are two interesting trajectories. On the one hand, we have higher access, which has increased in higher education, but maybe without that much of public support and state support. On the other hand, there is a demand that we should have enabling legislation for representative assemblies. So I just found it very interesting to see these different trajectories.
So one last question we'll take, please. The rest of you can talk to Mary over lunch. Yeah?
I'm Kapila Parashar and I teach in Lightpole and Annagar. So I have one observation.
Kapila, hold the mic closer.
Yes. So I have one observation to share. So the workplaces wherein women are seem to be having good representation. In those workspaces also, in terms of decision making, so women are underrepresented. This is what I have observed. And very specific strategies such as organizing decision-making meetings after office hours and creating a male coterie of decision-making have led to this, help in this. So how do these phenomena get visibility in public domain?
Okay, excellent questions. So on the job, education job interface, I think you raised a whole. So yes, add-on courses, skilling, what needs to be done at the level of the educational structure, what can be done on the job. I think some of these are being addressed, but sometimes I feel that the very fundamental lack of job opportunities is still not in the picture. It's not enough because, you know, I'm sure many students today are actually doing extra. I know they're doing a computer course on their own, they're doing this, that, they're sitting for the qualifying exams. To my mind, this issue of what has happened after 75 years of independence and what is our policy, the most poignant to my mind picture of our job market in general for everyone is when there is an announcement of government jobs in the railways. You know, not so long ago, there were pictures of the lakhs upon lakhs upon lakhs of aspirants for quite low-level railway jobs, for which there might be 1,000 or 2,000 posts, for which so many are applying. So this is where, if I may say so, government policy is in a very peculiar. So the desire of young people is the government job, which are vanishing. In our very midst, you all know how many of in your colleges are on contract, how many are ad hoc, how many are guest lecturers, how many casualizations are happening. You all know this more than I do. So there is this process of declining government jobs. The alternate job market is not developing, and young people are spending time and money all around. In fact, Delhi University's biggest political economy is the coaching industry. Nagar to wherever, Vijayanagar, the Kingsway camp, the rents that I think the middle classes here can gain from these young aspirants. This is the political economy of Delhi. With what future? So, and within that, gender gets lost. Because if there's such a funnel in terms of opportunities, what are the chances for women? So yes, I agree with you, extra costs, all of that, I don't disagree at all. But I'm not sure that we're getting at the root of it in that sense. Then, okay, violence. The lower levels of violence are bad enough. Yes, I agree. But, and they are scaring, they are making public places very masculinist. Say they are very masculinist, other than colleges and these spaces. That's why it's I'm lucky to have lived here, surrounded by such a nice heterogeneous population. In other parts, you will not see that kind of. Having said that, it is not enough to say so, because we are not noticing the extent to which homes, offices, workplaces are very violent places. So that is my only worry, that if we only see the danger outside, we miss the dangers at home. That's why I feel we must, I know it's hard to say, but older people must tell younger people, please watch out, not for the stranger, but watch out for people who say they're your friend. Watch out for an uncle who is misbehaving. Do we ever say that? We never say that. Very hard to say such things. The question of what was about, yes, decision making. So very true. Even in where the numbers may be better, where there are a lot of, say, female teachers, how many of them become principals, how many VCs do we, recently we are seeing a spate of female VCs, a very new phenomenon. But yes, where are they in decision making is a very good question. Or on the other hand, we're very good at tokenizing. So the head of ICICI was a woman. The head of PepsiCo was a woman. So these are ways in which we think we're solving the problem, but actually the glass ceiling has not been reached at all. And if you look at all the significant levels, the women are absent. So yes, you're absolutely right. So there are many, many questions here to be asked, I think, along with the question of mere numbers.
I think you've given us so much food for thought that this dialogue will continue, this discussion over lunch. Thank you so much. It's over to you, Anupam.
Thank you, Professor John, for very enlightening and evocative speech on the issue with data. Data which not only informs but which helps us raise more questions. Thank you very much for that. And Professor Ranganathan, although there will be a formal vote of thanks, my duty here is to announce two things. One, which I failed to announce earlier, is that Alumni Association now has a PAN card. We had to apply formally, and we are going to open the bank app soon, so we'll be happy to receive donations soon. Without which, money, we can't hold many of the events. Departments supported us, many of the alumni has informally supported us, so this is one. Another part is Professor N Basu's family has donated a sum of around 38,000 at some point of time, interest of which is used to give award to the meritorious student and the all-rounder student of CEI. It is given for both the co-curricular activities and curricular activities performance of the students. There is a committee in which the academic advisor of the Alumni Association, our patron, the head of the department, other faculty members are part, and they choose the person. So this year's award goes to 22-23 award goes to Miss Shweta Oja, who's their topper. She is not here today with us, but but we just like to acknowledge work of Shweta today. Thank you very much for the applause. I'm sure there are many questions, and we will take those questions over lunch. Lunch outside, but before that, invite our secretary. I have a very good team of managing committee at the Alumni Association, and foremost of these two, and I will fail in my duty if I not mention our faculty advisor, Dr. Ritu Bala, who is standing in the auditorium, so that the audience do not run away. Okay, so she is the person who's been very crucial to our work. The patron, Professor Pankaj Arora, has been giving us all the space, and the previous heads, when Namita ma'am was there, I joined as the president of the Alumni Association. She is there, and our secretary, Dr. Vikas Baniwa, who is a faculty here, and shoulder to shoulder we are working, holding all the responsibilities, organizing. So I invite now Vikas, acknowledging his good work, to propose vote of thanks. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Extending ma'am's thanks to everyone, I would like to first of all thank all the esteemed guests and senior teachers, my teachers, and people who shaped us a lot. Thank you very much, ma'am. And along with that, the audience, and I would like to share that in this August audience, we have administrators, teachers, scholars, bureaucrats, parents. So thank you very much everyone for being here. I would also like to thank the administrative and support staff, without whom this program would not have been possible. Also, I would like to thank Manmeet and Deeksha for a very smooth conduct of the program. Thank you very much. There will be registered outside for the recording of all your details in case whenever we reach out after opening of the account, and to keep you updated about the future programs of the Alumni Association. The lunch is in the Tagore quadrangle. I would request the audience to please be seated till the guests arrive in the quadrangle. That's okay. Thank you very much. And the recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and the link is in the invite. Yes. So
Sunday, but we must be very happy.
Yes. So thanks to everyone. Thank you very much.